Hey everyone, it's White Cross, and you have joined me for the Gold Rookies First Purchase Volume 3 Restrikes. If you are new to the channel, I appreciate you being with me here today. If you are a returning subscriber, you guys mean the world to me. Thank you so much for being part of this journey with me. I really appreciate it. And if you are a returning viewer but you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and click on that subscribe button. For those who are new to the channel, I begin each of my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor, and I'm not trying to give you financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience and my knowledge having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And I also try to begin each of my videos with a concept. In this case, the concept is the title of the video. We're going to be talking about restrikes. What is a restrike? They are a really interesting facet of precious metals and even coins in general. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background information and how they really do apply for those first-time gold buyers, those gold rookies out there. I think that these are a really interesting option for you and one that is definitely worth consideration. A restrike, for our purposes, is simply a coin that has been struck with a date on it that is earlier than the year in which it was made. There are some technical differences between restrikes and reissues. It's the same thing kind of as a backdated coin, but for our purposes, we're going to call them restrikes. That's what the bullion industry pretty much calls them. So a restrike, a coin with a date that is earlier than the year in which it was made. And you might ask, and I'll be happy to explain, why they did that. Why do countries still make coins with dates that are earlier than the year in which they were made? And there are several different reasons why they do this. The first one is commemoration. I've got some examples of some Maria Theresa thalers or thalers. This is where we get the word dollar from. It's these big silver coins that were first issued in Germany and Poland and Hungary, those types of areas. This was one of the world's first big circulating silver coins, and it circulated from the time that Maria Theresa, the ruler of Austria, Hungary, and Bohemia. She was a ruler from 1740 till about 1780, and these circulated widely around the world. They are particularly popular in Africa and places like Ethiopia in Africa. And she died in 1780. So out of commemoration for her years as being the monarch of those countries, they continued to make these with her figure on them. And they continue to have this date. You see that where my thumb says 1780, the year in which she died. They have continued, Austria, the country, has continued to make these coins to this day. So all the way up into the 2000s and beyond, they continue to strike these Maria Theresa thalers with that 1780 date. This is another example from Austria. This is a Franz Joseph Hungarian 4 ducat. He was the ruler of Austria-Hungary from about 1848 till 1916, so about 67 years. And he was the ruler, and they made these during his reign. But after he passed away, they continued to make these with the 1915 date. And you can see it up there in that same location by my thumb. Let's see if I can get it in a little bit closer. 1915. So examples of kind of commemorating rulers who had passed on. The hands that throw the levers of those countries were anxious to continue to make pieces that commemorated those rulers, and so they stayed. And then it became kind of a tradition. That's number 2, the reason why they would make restrikes. This was something that had been done in some cases for 50 or 75 years in the past, so they continued to make them because it was kind of a tradition. When you're talking about having made the MTTs, the Maria Theresa thalers, or the ducats of Franz Joseph of Austria, or even these are single ducats, the same ruler on these smaller gold coins, it kind of became an expectation. And then the next reason is necessity. So for some of these, in fact, most of these, the era that they were made, these coins represented money. Gold was being spent in the area that these were first released. And the majority of the pieces you see before you that are restrikes were made right after, up until World War One. So somewhere in that 1910, 1915 era. And there was a need for continued use of hard currencies right after World War One. The world was recovering from the disasters of World War One. A lot of countries were staring down the barrel of inflation that would soon lead to hyperinflation. So a lot of individuals in the surviving countries, the surviving areas, wanted and needed gold, maybe for the same reasons that you'd like to consider buying gold. Protecting their assets and giving them some hard currency in case things got bad again. They had just suffered through some pretty horrific things. So countries were kind of forced to continue to make these. In some cases, right about that same period of time, France was also dealing with these kinds of concerns, and the French people were very concerned about having hard currency, so they were holding dear to these 20 franc pieces. Now, we've talked a little bit about these 20 franc pieces in the video of this series where we talked about the Latin Monetary Union coins. These are generically called Napoleons because they are 20 franc pieces made in the same size and shape for 100 years in France. And the French government, really briefly, was hard up for gold. So they were trying to encourage their citizens to turn in their gold, and citizens were reluctant to do that for one reason, because the premiums on these pieces were really, really high following the war. And we've talked about premiums before. It's a concept that you need to get familiar with as a new gold buyer. A premium is the amount of money over and above the value of the gold contained within a coin or any other vehicle that you have to pay in order to acquire that. We'll talk about premiums a little bit later, and it's kind of an eye-opening thing when you start considering premiums on some of these pieces. But these pieces were trading at a very, very high premium. So the French government made a deal. They issued bonds where they were taking in these gold coins and they were paying people back with gold, but also paying them a small amount of interest. So they were billing it as being gold with interest. And the French people turned over these pieces en masse. And why did they do that? Why did the government do that? Why did the French government do that? Because they knew that these pieces were trading at such a high premium that they could, in the future, restrike these coins for the amount of gold contained within them, and then the French government would be able to get all of that premium for themselves. Did it work? Of course it didn't work. Things like that never work, but it didn't stop them from trying. There's a fascinating article about this, and I will post that link down below if you'd like a deeper dive, but that's just one of the reasons out of necessity that countries had continued to make these restrikes. And the third reason is a little bit on the conspiracy theory side. And I don't go into conspiracy theories. I'm not a big believer of doom and gloom. I like information more than anything. But there is one aspect about all of these restrikes that you see before you that I find particularly compelling. And that is, if Americans were under Executive Order 6102 in 1933, and a lot of my gold stackers out there will know what that order was. It was issued by President Roosevelt that said that Americans had to essentially turn in their gold. They could no longer own gold as American citizens. Now, that's not really the truth. The truth is that each American could own up to $100 face value in gold. And if you think that a $20 gold piece is about 1 troy ounce of gold, 5 times that amount for $100 would give the average American the ability to hold 5 ounces of gold. I suspect most Americans don't have 5 ounces of gold today. So you can see that there was still ways that Americans can own gold even after Executive Order 6102 in 1933. But aside from $100 face value in gold, Americans could own gold jewelry, and they could also own gold coins having recognized special value to collectors of rare and unusual coins. So the majority of the coins you see here before you are restrikes that were struck in the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s with dates that predate Executive Order 6102. So my last reason why restrikes might have been at least contributing to the idea of restrikes was because I think that some Americans, and maybe even some of the powers that be in America and some of the other countries that were stamping these coins out, knew that Americans would be more likely to acquire some of these pieces if they had dates prior to 1933, because it would be a little bit less, more difficult for any kind of authority to crack down on Americans if they had pieces dated from 1915 or 1905, for example. How would you know that these coins were made after 1933? You wouldn't, because the date predated that. So just my own little private conspiracy theory, I think there is something to that. I think evasion played at least a small role in some of these pieces. So now you've got a little bit of history about restrikes, why they were made, commemoration, tradition, necessity, and I think maybe a little bit of evasion. But there are a lot of benefits to restrikes. Remember, restrikes are simply coins made with a date that predates the year in which they were made. And some of those benefits, they have a low price point. Every coin in the Gold Rookies First Purchase series has a low price point, and I have picked these pieces specifically for you new or newer gold buyers, because I'd rather see you experiment with a lower price point gold coin. And if you happen to trip and fall along the way, it's not going to be quite as damaging to you as if you went for a full troy ounce 999 pure silver gold coin. Those are running in excess of $2,000. Every single coin in the Gold Rookies First Purchase series has a price point, hopefully, that's lower than $500, at least at the time that I'm filming these. So the benefits of these restrikes, they have a low price point. They also have a low premium. And we've talked about premiums a little bit before. Remember, a premium is the amount of money that costs you to buy the item over and above the value of the gold or the silver contained within the coin. Premium typically goes to cover the seller's profit. It covers their spread if they're buying high and selling low. It keeps their lights on. It pays their rent. Your idea is to pay as low a premium as you possibly can for your gold. And these restrikes often have very low premiums, especially relative to modern gold bullion pieces that have seen their premiums skyrocket in the last 6 months or a year and a half. And I'll give you a few examples. I showed these briefly before. This is an Austrian gold ducat, and this coin dated 1915, a restrike. They're still making these in Austria to this day. But I had a chance to kind of explore these before I started filming today. And this ducat has about $220 worth of gold as of today. And I went on AppMex, which is a large internet gold and silver bullion dealer, and I looked to see how much they're charging them. So $220 worth of gold, they're selling them for $256. So their premium is about $30. That's a pretty low premium. I'll give you a couple other examples here. This is that 20 franc rooster, Marianne and Rooster. Huge fan of these. They have about $371 worth of gold in them as I film this. AppMex has them for about $401. So again, about a $30 premium per coin. That's not that bad. And the last one I wanted to share with you was this 1955 dated Mexican 5 peso. Now, Mexican coins have gone through a recent spike in their prices. And you'll notice over time, if you've been doing this for a while, that pieces kind of ebb and flow with their popularity, with supply and demand. And right now, these Mexican pieces seem to be very hot. So this Mexican 5 peso has about $240 worth of gold in it. And AppMex is currently selling these for about $291. So about a $50 premium. That's a little bit higher than the other two that I've already talked about, but I want to give you something to compare them to. So the ducat's about a $30 premium. The French 20 franc, about a $30 premium, maybe a little bit more than that. And the Mexican piece, about a $50 premium. And all of these pieces are somewhere in that close to a quarter of an ounce range. And we'll talk about the weights in just a moment, but I wanted to give you something to compare it to. This is an American Gold Eagle quarter eagle. So this is the quarter ounce version of the American Gold Eagle, our current big bullion coin. And this has exactly 1/4 of a troy ounce of gold in it. So at about $2,000 an ounce, a quarter eagle has about $500 worth of gold in it. APMEX is currently selling these. We can get the come into focus. Yo, come on. APMEX is currently selling these for $675. So they have a $175 premium over and above the value of the gold contained within. So now you can start to see how low the premiums on some of these restrikes, and that's one of the reasons why I think these are a really good idea to consider strongly for your first gold purchase or some early gold purchases. There are some negatives though. I mentioned before that most of these are smaller, a little bit smaller than this quarter eagle, and that's the case. They all have slightly unusual weights and slightly unusual purities, at least compared to modern gold bullion coins. And the reason for that is pretty simple. These have been made sometimes for 100 years or longer, and way back then, they weren't making coins to be nice, precise units of a troy ounce or a half troy ounce or a quarter troy ounce or even a tenth of a troy ounce. For the most part, these coins were weighed and decided upon by treaties made in the 1800s, and they had a lot to do with trade at the time and ratios of gold to silver, and they were probably weighed in grams. So, for example, this gold ducat is 98.6% pure gold, which is a pretty high gold purity, but it's 0.1107 of a troy ounce in gold weight. And that's the actual gold weight. We've talked a little bit about AGW before. We're not really concerned about the weight of the coin. We're really concerned about the weight of the gold contained within. For example, this quarter eagle that I just showed you a moment ago is made out of 22 karat gold, 91.67% pure. Now, it's got 1/4 of an ounce of pure gold in it, but it's got a little bit of copper and a little bit of silver. We don't really care about the copper and the silver. All we're interested in is that actual gold weight. So this ducat has 0.1107 of a troy ounce of pure gold contained within. A little bit of an unusual percentage, not an easy fraction of a troy ounce. The Mexican piece, the 5 peso, 90% pure gold and 0.12067 of a troy ounce. Again, a little bit of an unusual weight and certainly a slightly different purity than modern gold bullion coins, which tend to be 24 karat gold, that's 99.9% pure, or 22 karat gold, again, 91.67% pure. And then finally, we'll take a look at the French piece again. And the French piece is 90% purity as well, and it is 0.1867 of a troy ounce. We've talked about these a lot in that Latin Monetary Union video. Go back and watch it if you haven't. There's a really fascinating history with all of the French coins, and I think they are a beautiful option. So some negatives. Odd weights and odd purities, at least compared to modern gold bullion coins. And we've already talked about the premiums being a benefit because they are so low compared to most modern premium gold bullion coins. But one of the reasons why those premiums are low is because there is lower demand for these pieces. It's important for me to feel like I'm arming you with the information that you need to make an informed decision. The premiums on these tend to be lower because the demand is lower. Right now, a lot of people are really anxious to buy those gold bullion coins, full ounce, troy ounce, half ounce, quarter ounce, tenth of an ounce. They want the modern gold bullion pieces that are 22 karat or 24 karat gold. So some of these pieces have become a little bit less desirable and their premiums have dropped. That is also kind of the other edge of that sword, the double-edged sword there. The premiums are lower because demand is a little bit lower. And finally, these pieces, because they are restrikes, because they have that date that is earlier than the year in which they were made, they have very little, if any, numismatic value. Numismatics is just the study and collection of coins. Because these are backdated, they don't appeal to coin collectors the same way that coins that are actually dated from the year in which they were made. Coin collectors tend to collect pieces by year. And if these were made in 1949 but dated 1914, that's just not as interesting to a coin collector. They tend to avoid restrikes for the most part. There are definitely some extenuating circumstances like the 1804 silver dollars, but for our intents and purposes here today, for the pieces that we're looking at, coin collectors don't really collect restrikes. They're not really interested in them. These are really more of a pure bullion piece. Believe it or not, they look interesting, they're beautiful, they have a little bit of history behind them, but they are just not that interesting to coin collectors. So some of the reasons why these have some negatives: odd weights and purities, a little bit lower demand, and little, if any, numismatic value. Honestly, I don't think that those are really compelling reasons to not at least consider these pieces, given all of the positives that they offer. So, which ones of these would I suggest to those rookie gold buyers, your first purchase or early purchases? I like the French 20 franc pieces. I think they're beautiful. They are a perennial favorite. They are the kinds of things that I have seen collectors go nuts for, investors go nuts for 30 years or 40 years, and they still seem to be so. And you can just see it's a beautiful coin. I think it's a really good opportunity, a really good option. These individual gold ducats are one of the least expensive gold coins you can buy on the market right now. And let me just give you a little bit of comparison. This is an American 10th eagle versus the Austrian gold ducat. Now, the gold ducat weighs 0.1107 of a troy ounce. The 10th eagle obviously weighs 0.1 of a troy ounce. Which would you rather have? Well, I know there's a lot of people saying they'd rather have the eagle, but I think the ducat is a compelling coin to at least consider. When you're considering the two, especially as a newer gold buyer, something that's just a little bit bigger, something that's just a little bit more interesting maybe, might have some benefits that you like. So that's number 2 of these that I would suggest: the French 20 franc piece, the Austrian ducat. And finally, I am a big fan of the Mexican gold pieces. These pieces, like I said, are particularly hot right now, so the premiums on these might be a little bit higher, but I think that they are also a very interesting, affordable option. Remember, we're talking about how much something like these cost, and 5 pesos somewhere in that $290 range, so trying to keep you down below that $300 price point. There you go. An introduction to restrikes for gold rookies and their first purchase, and why I think these are a pretty good idea to at least consider. If you have any questions about any of the pieces that I've talked about here today, go ahead and leave a question down below in the comment section, and I will try to answer it if I've got the information that can help you out. If you have suggestions for other things you'd like to see in the Gold Rookies First Purchase series, and I will tell you that we've got at least one more video coming out that will talk about British sovereigns along with American gold coins from 1933 and before. And if you have suggestions, topics that you'd like to see me cover in this series or other series, leave a comment down below. I would love to read the comment, and hopefully I can address the issue that you are considering. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, take a second and subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot when we're trying to get the word out about these videos to other people who are looking for this type of information online. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.